Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com. And joining me, as always, is my co host, Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. And we're here to join you after a big win for Nebraska basketball on Sunday. They got a big victory over Penn State as a 3.5 point underdog. Keisei Tominanga went off for 30 points. So we'll see what that leads forward for Fred Hoiberg. But are you feeling better about the basketball team after last night's win, Danny?
I am. I know I was really negative last week, really negative, but this team did what they've done all season. They've showed fight. They've showed that they're not going to give up, and I think they did a really good job of, you know, uh, beating a team that I believe they lost to last time out in College Station. So, and it seems like each program has their own kryptonite, and it seems like Nebraska has been able to get the better of Micah Shrewsbury over the past couple seasons. So at least that's something the program can hang their hat on.
Yeah, I mean it ended. Obviously, I think it was a 4 game losing streak. They lost 6 of 7 games, and so they definitely needed to get this win. The last game that they won was over at Ohio State, who is I believe in 13th place right now. So this is probably outside of the Iowa win, this is probably the best win Nebraska's had in the Big Ten. And Penn State's a team that's actually needed that win to try to get to the NCAA tournament. So, I mean that was impressive. But does this move? Or does this win kind of move the needle, I think, for Fred Hoiberg? I mean, what's your I know we've talked about this before, and this kind of rekindled the debate yesterday. People are talking about, Fred Hoiberg and really the I guess, kind of a sentiment coming, that I've seen is like, okay, so say if he beat Penn State and a few of these other teams and get like 6, 7 wins, is that really enough to keep Fred, or should Nebraska basketball be kind of aiming higher, I guess, in the future than it is right now?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because on one hand, he's having a much better season record wise than his previous seasons, and he's winning in the Big Ten. But on the other hand, his good is still not normal college basketball good. So you kind of wonder, do, do they help his case? Yeah. Would I be upset if they fired him and they, started with a new coach? No. So, I don't know if they move the needle. I think at this point, they definitely help his case. But for me, I'm not so sure that this would solidify him coming back for me personally. I understand the injuries and all the rebuilds he's had to do over the past couple of years, but our barometer of success is very often the normal expected success for any successful basketball program. So I don't know if these wins move the needle.
Yeah, and he's had 4 years to build. So I mean, injuries shouldn't be. I mean, I get it, but there's injuries to every team in college basketball. So I don't want to give Fred a pass for that. I just
Right.
think it's going to be a tough decision for Trev Alberts to, move on from him. But at the same time, I've just been writing, different preview articles and stuff, and I just keep getting the vibe of the 2021 football season where where the Huskers went 3-9, they were close and they played hard and they put forth a lot of great effort. It wasn't an issue of effort. There just were constant mistakes and things like that. And I feel like the same thing is with this basketball team. Not that the effort's there, and there is some talent on this team. I mean, Keisei Tominaga had a great night last night, and this dude needs to be starting. I mean, going off for 30 points. And so, I mean, I do have hope for the future, but you are going to be losing Derek Walker and Sam Griesel next year. So, I mean, that's obviously a worrisome thing. But I'm just wondering if Fred stays and then next season goes badly and then he's fired next year, if we're not looking back and like we should have just done it after in 2023. So that's my concern. I don't want to have that season like we wasted last season on Scott Frost in the football, and I don't want to waste next year on Fred Hoiberg if it's just clear it's not going to work out.
I also think the ceiling is a little bit lower for basketball than it is for football. But with that being said, um, I guess no, they don't move the needle. I guess I can give you a definitive answer now because when you really think about it, like I said just a couple minutes ago, the success that we're having now should be a normal standard of success. It's not like we're asking him to win Big Ten tournaments every single year and go undefeated in conference play. I mean, his good year is the bare minimum. And not that it's his fault, but I look at his development of players here, and it hasn't been that strong either. That and player retainment hasn't been strong. And I understand it's not all his fault, but, he's leading the ship and, trying to reconstruct rosters. And like you just mentioned, he's going to lose his best players on this year's team next year, and Walker and Greasel. You know, nothing that he's done in the past says to me that he can kind of, you know, take this year and build off on it. If anything, I feel like this team is going to regress, and then we're talking about, 3 or 4 wins in conference play again.
Yeah, and there are some things that aren't his fault, obviously, but the program should be in better position, talent and depth wise. I feel like than it is right now, and yeah, obviously it hurts losing Gary and Bandamel, but look, Jamarcus Lawrence has stepped up really well. He hit 3 threes last night. So I mean, there's pieces on this roster. The depth is where they really struggle. But but again, if you look back at like the Illinois game, I mean, they were right in that game at halftime. I can't remember, they were either ahead or down by 2 or whatever it was. But I mean, in the second half, they came out and just had a barrage of turnovers. So you can't turn the basketball over, whether you're playing college basketball or it's, 8th grade basketball, middle school hoops. You can't turn the ball over 20 times every night and expect to win. And so last night, Nebraska turned the ball over 7 times. They only had 6 fouls. And that's how they basically won the game, because Penn State hit 14 3-pointers. And if you had told me going into that game that Penn State had more than 10 threes, I would not have thought Nebraska was going to win, but they dominated in the 2-point area. They played really solid defense, and they hit just enough threes to kind of keep things going. But Penn State only attempted 1 free throw. So Nebraska was +9 at the free throw line. They were +18 in the 2-point battle. So I mean, that's how you have to win games, but I just don't know if they are going to be able to do that, consistently. They're going to have to find another big guy in the transfer portal, probably a point guard. And it sure would help if Nebraska could get this NIL thing figured out, because in basketball, it really does make a huge difference, because there's a few, there's not as many difference makers, I guess, in the transfer portal that way. So, I mean, if you could get your NIL game figured out and get, a big time, big guy or point guard, I mean, it might help. But I feel like this program, it's like with the football team. It shouldn't go 5 years without a bowl game. Nebraska basketball shouldn't go 5 years without some sort of postseason appearance beyond the Big Ten tournament. So, I mean, to me, I feel like the only way I can definitively say that Fred's back is if he gets him to the NIT, which they still could have an outside shot of doing if they finish 5-2, which is a long shot, no doubt about it. But I mean, he has to start doing something to justify his job. We're paying this guy millions and millions and millions of dollars to be the absolute, worst team in the conference. So to me, something just doesn't, sit right with that.
Not at all. And the guy who hired him isn't even here anymore. So Trev really doesn't have any, you know, ties to Fred. He doesn't have to deal with this. And, the other thing is, under Fred Hoiberg, the peaks have been, kind of high, but the valleys have been very low. I mean, and so there's been no consistency. I mean, you take a look at the Iowa game back in December, for example, and they played outstanding. Sure, they left the Iowa shooters open a little bit, but they were able to get the job done. And then you take a look at the Illinois game at the end of January, or the middle part of January rather, and they just got destroyed. So there's no, measure of consistency with this team either. I mean, it seems like, we should have won the Purdue game, but then we got blown out in the first half by, St. John's and never really recovered. So there's really no consistency with this program either. And to me, that's alarming in year 4. I know, new rosters, new players and things like that, but, you know, it kind of reminds me of, previous years with football. They start off strong and then they kind of fade towards the end. There's just no consistency within the program.
So here's the look at the schedule. They got 7 games left. It's at Michigan on Wednesday, home against Wisconsin on Saturday, at Rutgers next Tuesday, then home against Maryland, home against Minnesota, home against Michigan State. So a 3-game homestand in there, and then the last game's at Iowa. So there's 7 games in there. If Nebraska could win 5, they'd finish 9-11 in the Big Ten standings, and I think that they would finish above 500. I think that's how I count. They might have to win one in the Big Ten tournament, but It's going to be really tough. To that Michigan game is going to be tough. They're playing better. Wisconsin at home, that's a game that you have to win right now. They're one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. They're right along with Nebraska. They're probably about Penn State's level.
Which is crazy when you think about the Wisconsin programs of old.
Yeah, I mean it is true though that this league is really tough. I mean it
Yeah.
is really really tough, and if you, I mean almost there are no gimme games. I mean Minnesota is the closest thing, and they've beaten they're a pretty solid team too. So
Rutgers is really good. Don't sleep on Rutgers. I know some of us like to do that, me included, but they're really
yeah,
good.
they're legit in basketball for sure. They're going to the tournament this year, and winning at Rutgers is like nearly impossible. So I mean
Great
those
home
two.
court there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the 3 road games are really going to be at Michigan, at Rutgers, and at Iowa. And like honestly, looking at those 3 games, like surprising Michigan maybe would be the best chance. Like if they just maybe Michigan underestimates Nebraska this week, or I think they might be playing Michigan State on. Oh no, Michigan's playing Indiana on next Saturday. I was thinking maybe if they'd overlook Nebraska, but that honestly, because winning at Iowa is not going to be easy either.
No.
So, and then you have to win. But look, if even if they just win their last 4 home games and finish 8-12, I mean, I feel like that would be a big improvement. I mean, it's still not where we would need to be, but I feel like that would be enough to keep Fred's job at this point. I mean, even though I still kind of have that same feeling though. I mean, about football and all that, because it's like if you gave me odds on it next year, like, okay, so let's say, is Fred going to be the coach in 2020 in the 2024 season? We'll just call it, to make things easy, 2024 next season. I mean, I would say probably like 50-50, but then if you go the year beyond that, it's probably like still 50-50 or a little bit lower. So it's like, are we just putting this off a year, I guess, is my thing. And if that's the case, maybe we really should look at, making this move and really trying to make an investment in this program. I think I read an article, Sam McKeon, I'm sorry if I've got the name right, the guy for the Omaha World Herald.
I don't know how to pronounce his name either. So,
and he was talking about that though, like Nebraska's, Hoiberg's paid in the top half of coaches, but Nebraska should really just, decide that, hey, like being a middle of the run program isn't enough. I mean, there's a lot of, money invested in this thing. He was talking about getting just an AD for college or just for basketball, an assistant AD for basketball, which I do think would be a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely do.
But look, it's Nebraska's in the Big Ten, so they have to get away from this attitude of like, basketball is just whatever. And I don't think that's. I do think Nebraska wants to be good at basketball, but it just hasn't worked under Fred Hoiberg. And I know everybody. The big question is, well, who would you go get? I mean, that's up to Trev Albert. I mean, we all said the same thing about Scott Frost. If Scott Frost is going to leave, who's going to, and then Matt Rule kind of, fell into our lap. So sometimes things just work out. You just never know. And you can't be afraid of the future of who you're going to hire. But we'll see how the season finishes. But I still think it's up in the air whether Fred will be back, next year. And I just have a hard time seeing him with the current trajectory of the program, like having long-term success here, to not be fired in the next season or two. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you're just delaying it at this point, and you don't want to make the same mistake you made with football. And, you know, um, out of this stretch that they're going on, I see maybe wins against Minnesota and Wisconsin, and that's it. Because it's not, to me, it's not a question of can this team play hard, and they've showed they can play hard. It's a question of in the second half when you need to buckle down, the lack of depth and development is going to really hurt you in those games. And I know we beat Iowa, but that was an off night for Iowa. I remember we left them open a lot and they just couldn't hit a 3-point shot. And so you're not always going to get that lucky. And you know, I just to me, it's not about, oh, who are we going to hire? Is it going to be successful for the program? Because right now, what are we doing? We're losing games, and we're 500 in the Big Ten in the last 3 years. So to me, it's not really who are we going to bring in. Is he going to be a detriment to the program? We can't really get any worse, especially when you compile the records of the past couple seasons. This was the first season that we kind of felt like, okay, we're onto something here. But other than that, I mean, I don't think, thinking outside the box and trying to, find a basketball coach, I don't think it's going to hurt the program at all, because the results just haven't been there with the current one.
I mean, yeah, you can't do any worse than they've already. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could coach the team to like 4 Big Ten wins. I mean, like But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there's got to be some people out there. There's good coaches out there. I mean, that's the thing is, like you can find good coaches and guys that have won at places that are a lot harder than Nebraska. So hopefully, Fred. I mean, turns us. I mean, maybe Fred will just prove us wrong and get this team to the NIT, and then that'll totally change the perspective on it. But that's kind of what I thought coming into the season, that this team had the potential to make the NIT, and I feel like if they don't do that, I just feel like that's kind of a disappointment. And this was Fred's best team. I mean, I think everybody can agree with that. It was his most win ready team, I guess you want to say. And then, I mean, if you still end up like 6-14 in the Big Ten, well, then that's the best you can do. I mean, that's not
If
good
that's your
enough.
most
I
win-ready
mean,
team and that's what you hang your hat on
yeah,
for the past 4 years or so, then maybe it's time to pack your bags.
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's not the expectation needs to be like, that's not good enough. And so
No.
either, I mean, I can understand if they don't want to pay him like the 11. And this is just, I've heard people say this. I haven't like checked it. I haven't seen the contract, but I know the buyout's like 11 million bucks or whatever. So maybe there would be some hesitation there. But again, it's like, do you guys want to invest in the sport or do you want to be an also ran? That's a decision Nebraska has to make. And I think they're going to try to. I mean, there's no reason with all this money that the school has to the Big Ten. Like, you might as well spend it because this program, I mean, the people who are filling up the vault, I mean, they deserve better than this basketball program. And I'll just say that.
The place was packed. The place has been absolutely packed. They've
Yeah,
been
it's been
loud.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
they've been loud and they've been excited, and it just really speaks to how passionate the fans are for the program. So to just deliver, I'll say for right now, a 500 product in Big Ten play, I don't think that's a big ask at all. And so, I think the fans do deserve better, and we saw it happen. With football, we got a brand new coaching hire and a splash. I mean, maybe we can see something like that with basketball because the fans do deserve better. And I think the basketball program, can get back to some sort of respectability. But you know, right now it's right now it's just in a tough spot. And people say, and I've heard this a ton, oh, we never should have fired Tim Miles. The bottom fell out once Isaac Copeland got hurt in Tim Miles last season. So I don't know if he would have been as effective, in the future. And I don't think he was necessarily a good recruiter as well.
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't have a short list of candidates for you, but I could have one if I really looked into it.
We'll
I'm
have
sure there's
time to
some
come
guys.
up with one, I
Yeah, we'll
think,
have some.
maybe.
We'll have time. Hopefully, it doesn't get to that point. And I mean, congrats on the win last night. Not to like spoil,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I mean that
yeah.
was a good win. It was nice to. It was good to just get a win. That's how I felt last night. Like how I felt when Nebraska like trying to want beat like Indiana in football this season. Just like getting, I just didn't want to see this team lose like the last 10 games of the season. So now I have some more hope. I mean, and some of these guys are stepping up. Lawrence stepping up, Tominaga. He's back
Dawson.
next year. Yeah, Dawson. I mean, and all those guys playing is going to help. Especially those two guards. But you're still going to have to add some guys this offseason. So I mean, we'll see. But good win last night. We'll switch gears a little bit. There's not a ton of kind of football news, but there's a couple of things. Obviously, it's the Super Bowl this week, in case any of you guys forgot. And there are a slew of Huskers playing for the Eagles. We've got Cam Jurgens, Jack Stoll, and Ndamukong Suh. My boy Ndamukong Suh still playing, looking to get another ring. And then shoot, I forget it's Booty we got playing for the Broncos, right? Or for the Chiefs.
DiCaprio Boodle.
Yeah,
Yep.
Boodle. Yeah, DiCaprio Boodle. I always want to say that's an I in the end instead of an L. I don't know why. I've
Not
always done
Booty.
that.
Not Booty. And
Boodle.
and and in fact, he was not Booty during his time at Nebraska. He was pretty good. So we could definitely use him in the secondary. We could have used him a couple years ago in the secondary, but anyway, Boodle, and then was there one more, or is that it?
I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for the Chiefs.
But yeah, so I mean, shout out to Cam Jurgens. I absolutely ripped him when he went into the NFL draft, and now he's a very good center, and he proved us all wrong. He proved me wrong, that's for sure. And I think when you look at Trey Palmer didn't exactly make a splash in the Senior Bowl, but if you look at the recent success of getting Nebraska players to the NFL, Jurgens had a great combine and he really stood out to a lot of scouts. So I thought it was pretty interesting that Palmer didn't, play this weekend, but I think another team will be able to pick him up maybe in the later rounds or something. I definitely think he's going to be drafted. I just think also that the wide receiver class this year is deep with late round talent.
Yeah, I've always thought that Trey was going to go like rounds 4 to 7, rounds 5 to 7. I don't see him being a day 2 or 3 pick, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be a good player. I mean, lots of guys go in the 5th round. I mean, I know he turned into a bit of a psycho, but this is just the first guy off the top of my head. But Antonio Brown was a 6th rounder out of Western Michigan or whatever, and he became an All Pro. So the scouting process, especially when it comes to receivers, is very there's a lot of guys that are kind of in that same range, and it just depends where you fit. But I mean, with the right
Julian
fit,
Edelman,
yeah, exactly. A 7th round pick. I mean, he played
former
quarterback.
quarterback, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just about finding the right fit, and but Trey's a guy that I think he's got a future because for one, he can play in the slot, but two, he can play on the outside. He's got that speed. I think he can help as a return guy. So even though I do think he's getting a little bit slept on during this draft process, once he gets to the combine and posts a really good time there, that's really going to be where he shines. And I did see him make a few plays in practice this week at the Senior Bowl, and what happens in the game, I just don't think it matters a heck of a whole lot, really at the end of the day. So it would have been fun to see him, ball out there. I'm not sure why he wasn't given the opportunity. Maybe there was, something. Maybe there was injury. I really don't know. It's just kind of a weird deal. I didn't pay that much attention to it, but I do think he's going to have a chance to be a solid player, though, and I'll be interested to see too when they get to the NFL Combine. I mean, how guys like Garrett Nelson and O'Shawn Mathis do. I think that's going to be really important for those guys to put up a solid time. And I'm trying to think about who else could even get drafted for Nebraska off the top of my head. Vokalek. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but he's definitely going to get signed. I think it would have helped him had he not gotten injured this year. But
He
he
was on a
really,
very good trajectory this year, minus
yeah,
the injuries. So, and I think if Trey Palmer played on a winning team or a team not Nebraska, I bet you he wouldn't be as slept on.
yeah, probably. I mean, I think so. But you just got to get your chance in the NFL. That's the biggest thing. The second contract is way more important than the first one. So even if you get drafted rounds 3 through 5, but look, the thing is, man, if he puts out a blazing time, if he runs like sub 4.4 at the combine, then he might go into those top 100 picks. You never know, and beauty's the eye of the beholder. We've seen NFL teams. I mean, we've seen the Patriots and the Raiders, draft guys in the 2nd round, and people are like, who the hell is that? So no reason that Trey Palmer or somebody can't surprise, but I wonder if Nebraska, maybe 4 guys could get drafted. I could maybe see Vokalek getting drafted in like the 7th round because I do
Vo-
think he's a pretty good 2-way tight end.
Vokalek, Palmer, and then
Nelson and
Mathis.
Nelson and Mathis, maybe.
Ooh, I see 3: Mathis, Vokalek, and Palmer. I think Nelson. Again, I still think Nelson left too early, but to each
See, I
his
could
own.
I could see him get. I think he'll get picked in like the 7th round. I just think he's got enough to, because he's a really good run stuffer too. I mean, that's one thing he kind of doesn't get enough credit for, I
Yeah,
think, from fans, is his run stopping ability. And he does need to improve as a pass rusher for sure. But I think he's got some raw ability. But it depends too how he runs and how he does, those cone things, the cone drill and all that type of stuff. Because some teams are going to look at him and say, hey, like, this is an edge. He needs to stand up. In our scheme, he needs to be, or at least have the ability to be a stand-up edge. And I'm not sure that he can do that really well. I think he's more of a hand in the dirt type of player, but we'll
yeah,
see. I mean, that's where all that testing and stuff really is important because, they're trying to project you to be like an edge outside linebacker. They're looking to see if you can actually like athletically make those movements.
yeah. And I think he has the potential to be a very good edge type of player. I just think he probably could have used another year of refining it, so he would have 2 years of that on tape. But hopefully he gets drafted, and I think he might be a little bit more of a project player, but he's the type of low risk, very 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 high upside player that teams like. And I'm curious to see too with the talent that this current program is bringing in, if we see more draft picks in the future, because I see some names and I'm not going to put any expectations or pressure on them, but I see names that I think will fit very well in the NFL when their time comes. Like especially if you talk about a guy like Uma Malian, or I just said I'm not going to name names, but screw it, I'm naming names. Or a guy like Malachi Coleman. I think that type of deep threat wide receiver. I think there are some. I think this program can get some names into the NFL in the future, and you know what? If we win, it'll make it that much easier to get them to the show.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely NFL talent on this roster. I think there's some guys. Quentin Newsom in the secondary is one. I think Miles Farmer potentially has some NFL ability. You know,
AJ Allen, I think, does.
yeah, AJ Allen definitely does. I think Anthony Grant, could have a shot. I'm not saying he's going to be like an early pick or something, but he could be looking at like two, 1,000-yard seasons in the Big Ten. So I think that guy's going to at least get a shot in the NFL. So that yeah, there's definitely some talent on this team, and it'll be interesting to see. I was thinking when you were talking, I wish that Garrett Nelson was a part of this defensive line because I'd feel a lot better
He would have
about
been
it. But
good. He would have been good
yeah,
on this defensive line, but to each his own. Maybe he just didn't want to go through a new coaching staff, and but I think when you look at some of the speed guys, like we mentioned Coleman and we mentioned Lloyd, but I think when you look at some of the speed guys and the fact that this program continues to want speed, I think that will help out this program in the future. They just offered a kid, I don't remember his name, 2024 out of Virginia on Saturday, who's really, really fast. And so, I think that speed element that this program wants will translate over into the NFL. I mean, you just look at skill wise, like a guy like Tyreek Hill or somebody who plays, to a lesser extent like McCole Hardman, that type of gadget player in this type of wide open NFL offense, league. Speed rules the day, and I think this program wants it, and I think that could prepare players very well for the next level. I think, for this coaching staff, next level preparation is a big thing, and I'm not sure if it was for others, for other staffs, even say 2 years ago.
well, yeah, and look, kids want to make the NFL. They want to get to the playoff and they want to play. That's basically, and they want NIL. That's so essentially, kids want four things: they want to get on the field, they want their NIL money, they want to be in the playoff, and then they want to get to the NFL. So you have to be able to. I mean, if you want to really recruit at the big level, like that's what those Alabama, all those big schools offer. All four of those things, the best ones, and those are the teams that get the best players. So that's what Nebraska has to do, and I feel like Matt Rule is going to do a good job of getting guys to the NFL. I feel like this next 5-10 years is going to be a great run for Nebraska in that regard. Starting to look more like Nebraska used to look like I'm not saying we're going to win like we did in the 90s by any means, but I'm saying in terms of
Don't
having
get that
like,
conversation going. Don't get
but
that.
but multiple guys,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, and I mean, people. So Tom Osborne was the coach for like 27 years or 25 years. I mean, don't kill me, people. Okay, if I get, but look, he had most of those eras. The thing that kind of defined him was that he never won fewer than 9 games. I mean, he had the great 5-year stretch where they won 3 national championships, but like before that, Tom Osborne was known as the guy that couldn't win the big games. So I mean, like, if Nebraska can just get back to the point where we can win 8 or 9 games every year, like, to me, that's where this program should be. And I do think that is realistic. And then, I feel like they can start turning out, getting guys going to the NFL like they were consistently in the 90s in the trenches and the skill positions. And you mean Nebraska used to dominate in terms of like offensive linemen, running backs, pass rushers, and defensive backs. I mean, those are, and linebackers too. But I mean, there was always guys getting drafted on the defense to the NFL. And that's what really, I mean, the offensive line too. And that's really made all those teams great. But the defenses is what won Tom Osborne all those championships, in my opinion, and we got to start getting those guys drafted to the NFL again. And I do think this staff is going to do a good job at that.
And even during the Frost era, we saw several players drafted. It kind of made you wonder, like maybe it really is the coach that's not working out here because we had, let's see, Doman drafted, we had Boodle drafted, or Boodle was signed as an undrafted free agent, and I actually believe Doman was as well. But you saw guys go to the NFL, and you were just sitting there thinking like, huh, interesting. I wonder why so many guys are going to the NFL, and we had 6 wins in the last 2 years, but in any event, I think, you look at a guy, for example, like Hassan Reddick. somebody that Matt Rule was able to develop, and PJ Walker was another one, and I do think that the Nebraska NFL pipeline, so to speak, will be able to come back uh, under this new coaching staff, and I think with their ability to develop linemen, I mean, that's one of the things that you know teams really want. I mean, even a smaller school up here where I live, like Boston College, they were able to develop Chris Lindstrom, develop Zion Johnson, I believe his name was, and you know he- Johnson went 17th overall, and Chris Lindstrom was also picked in the middle of the first round. So it's about development, and if they can just develop that line position, that could start a nice pipeline for the program in its own right.
Yeah, and one thing to talk about guys who could get to the future of the NFL. We should toss in a Dylan Raiola update here. There's not a ton of recruiting news to come out of this weekend. I mean, it's a dead period right now, so there's not. Coaches can't make visits and recruits can't take visits anywhere. I mean, so there is kind of a slow period right now. But Dylan Raiola did an interview with The Athletic, and he did talk about a couple of future visits planned. I actually didn't see this until earlier this morning, but he's said that he's going to take a visit to Georgia on March 18th and Nebraska on March 25th. I'm not sure if these are official visits. I believe that is the time where you could take official visits if you want to. I'd have to double check that. I know it's kind of in that spring time frame. But the fact that Nebraska's got one of those two visits scheduled, I think is important. I don't think it's a huge surprise. I feel like they're right, in that top two with Georgia. And I know USC's, if you want to make it a top four with USC and Oregon, but I feel like the top two right now are Nebraska and Georgia. USC's like right on the outside. I know people mention Oregon, but until he goes there and visits the school, I'm not really going to give another school much credence. I think visits really tell the story in college football recruiting. I mean, that really is the truth in the relationship. So I think that that's big. Another thing that caught my eye though, Husker Online kind of hosted their, like a open thing for, recruits, and a little bit of intel that came out of that. Brian Munson on Husker Online was he talked to Daniel Kalen, who said that he's looking at making a decision next month. So it kind of the way things are setting up, it's like, oh, if Nebraska misses on Raiola, they could try to get Daniel Kalen. Well, it's not looking like that's going to work out. So it looks like it's either going to be like Raiola or nothing in this. Not that there aren't other quarterbacks, but those are the two guys that we've kind of been talking about, and it seems like their timelines just aren't matching up. So I don't know what's your thoughts on all that type of stuff.
Rayola is supposed to make his decision in March, correct?
I mean, that's what he said, but if he's unless he's making the decision after those visits, which would be
I was
great for
gonna say
Nebraska, but
I really like that we're getting a March 25th visit, because to me, if he's making a decision in March, like he said, things could change, but like he said, if he's making a decision in March, getting that visit toward the end of the month could be crucial.
mhm.
I don't exactly I don't exactly love the same timelines for Kalen and Rayola. I feel like if they miss out on Rayola, they are going to have to either move really quickly with Kalen or have a very solid backup plan. But I kind of like where Nebraska sits for that. What'd you say, March 25th visit?
I think so. Yeah, that could be a couple of days here or there, but I believe that's what it was March 25th.
I like that we're getting that visit toward the end of the month. If he stays with his March timeline, I think that's really even a better thing for Nebraska. And as far as Kalen goes, I think if Nebraska misses out on Raiola and they want to land Kalen, then they better make moves quickly. But it'll be interesting to see. The worst thing that could happen to me is that they don't get either guy in the class, which is also something, given Nebraska's recent luck, I could see happening. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to land one or the other. And you know, uh, to me, I kind of feel like Raiola's going to Nebraska just based off the timeline and based off the fact that he originally wanted to decide in March.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's we'll see. I mean, because Kalen was talking about that he wanted to make a decision in January, and then so I mean, these timelines too kind of get pushed around a little bit based on coaching staff and other guys out there. But I mean, I know Colorado offered him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who else is pushing for him to make that decision yet. But look, it doesn't mean guys couldn't get flipped or whatever. I mean, Matt Rule told him, "I don't want you to leave the state of Nebraska," but it's pretty obvious where Nebraska's investing the majority of its eggs, I guess, so to speak, in its recruiting quarterback basket is with Dylan Raiola. So we'll see. It's hard to blame him for that. I mean, he's basically got everything you could ever want in a quarterback. To me, he's like the next Caleb Williams, and so I would love to get him, and we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see between now and March if he winds up in Lincoln on some trip with his dad to see his uncle or something. That would be another, because that's an advantage Nebraska has that nobody else can't, because recruits can't be on campus, except he has that family tie, so it wouldn't be like a visit or whatever. So I'm interested to see if something like that happens. Other than that, I think we're just going to keep seeing, the staff kind of put out offers and, kind of do those things and keep things going forward with this 2024 class.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see if Raiola commits here, for example, what other dominoes follow, what other recruits will come in here, maybe even shortly after. I mean, because Dylan Raiola has that type of star power, so to speak, to where receivers will want to play with him, receivers will want to come here, receiving running backs will want to come here. So I'll be interested to see the domino effect, overall that Raiola creates for Nebraska. And if we don't land him, what does that mean for our quarterback search in the future? It's a very interesting and kind of polarizing dynamic for the program. But I'm just kind of as I say, happy to be here if I'm Nebraska. Competing against Georgia for a recruit is difficult, but if we want to get some of the big dogs, we got to compete with some of the big dogs. So,
And I'm just looking through the calendar. So I do believe that he would be able to take official visits, in that March time frame, and then I think there would be another frame in April to May, and then in June again, where you'd be able to take. So there's a few different windows where you can take, those kind of official visits. So that would be, that I think that that would be a time where he could do that, and that would be huge for Nebraska to be able to land him. Would be an incredible get, and it would definitely jumpstart the recruiting momentum for 2024. And we'll definitely be keeping you up to date on all of the Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kalen and all the recruiting info that you need to know. So make sure that you guys, hit that, subscribe button, subscribe to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. Make sure that you get into the comment section. Let us know what you think about Fred Hoiberg and, this recruiting class, and, hell, throw out your Super Bowl predictions. I'm going with the Chiefs, but, get into the and Danny, before we head out, what's your Super Bowl pick for this week?
probably the Chiefs, 31 to, I'll say, 31-28. I think it's going to be a last possession game. I really do. I think it's going to be a tough game because the Kansas City Chiefs defense, they play okay, but the Eagles have weapons. So I think it's going to be a good game regardless.
I agree. I do think I'm going to say like 34-31 Chiefs. I think it's going to
Right.
be a good one, though.
Yeah,
Right.
I do.
I do think, yeah, like Pat Mahomes will get the ball with like 40 seconds left and get him in field goal range to win it. But
And also in the comments, if you have any ideas for anything you want us to talk about, please let us know. We're kind of entering into a dead period in terms of content. So any fan suggestions, please let us know. We love talking, as you probably realized. So, just let us know. And I think good times are ahead. I know I've said that before, but I really do believe that good times are ahead for the program, football program.
yeah, we'll put out some maybe some mailbags. We'll start doing some more of that stuff, and we'll start looking ahead to 2023. Maybe start doing some spring ball predictions and some stuff like that, because it's not that far away, really.
No, it really isn't. Let's see. We
So
got, is it April 22nd? Right?
yeah, that's the spring game. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head when spring football starts, but it has to be next month.
Well, we're in February already, which I can't believe. So yeah, I would assume so. And then I think what I'm planning to do is a lot is a reaction and chat stream for the spring game. So I have that to look forward to. So I'd love for you guys to get into the comments and chat during the spring game. I don't know if Chris, if you can make it. I know Saturdays are tough, but I'm planning to do that because I have no life whatsoever. So
If the work schedule will allow, I'll be there. But if not, I'll have to like watch it on my phone. I'll probably be at like a track meet or something. But maybe not. Hopefully, it'll work out.
so all
But
right.
all right, guys. Well, again, thanks for joining us, and hit that subscribe button, like, and comment. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.